She unleashes her fury upon the scoundrels who so openly conspired to murder their own brother. Miu and Anne, however, share a look of extreme hostility, oblivious to the true power this reborn Manhwa hides. They act as if plotting fratricide is a trivial matter, now walking on eggshells around their mother's rage. After all, conflict was always encouraged for the sake of fierce competition as they were raised. Each of them had to endure significant hardship while growing up during their time in the intermediate class. Rosa acknowledges their unspoken defense, validating their concerns by confirming the necessity of that competition. But she immediately points out that, at the same time, neither Anne nor Miu managed to achieve the rank of a 5-star knight at such a tender age. Jyn is on an entirely different level. In essence, their mother is making it clear she refuses to lose an exceptional, reincarnated talent like him to their petty, homicidal antics. What's more, Lentia, Ran, and Vigo are facing equal punishment for their complicity in the scheme. They are all being punished by being forced to return their precious swords to the clan's armory. Rosa even threatens to confiscate every single blade in their possession should they fail to comply. Amidst all the commotion, Rosa turns her attention to Jyn, waiting for his response. She wonders if he's going to meekly accept her protection or if he will cleverly use this situation to his own advantage. In truth, she wants to test the boy's resolve. To her surprise, Jyn raises his voice, declaring his intention to undertake the mission anyway. Rosa is visibly shocked, believing he fails to grasp the immense danger that comes with accepting such a task. The territory of the Zeals is a terrifying place, yet Jyn remains unshakably confident of his victory. He claims he is all for the mission assigned to him by his beloved sisters. In fact, he goes so far as to side with them, thanking them for helping him secure a mission that is perfectly within his capabilities. Rosa scoffs, taunting him for putting on a courageous act, but the 15-year-old calmly expresses concern for the clan's reputation should a high-profile mission be changed so suddenly. Rosa immediately blasts his flimsy excuse, knowing full well that he's simply being exploited through this mission, as his siblings cannot yet challenge him directly. And that is precisely what Jyn is counting on. He's aware that he's no match for his sisters in a direct confrontation at present, so he intends to prove a point by utterly and completely destroying them through the outcome of this mission. Rosa remains cautious, reminding him one last time of the grave danger, but Jyn is more than glad to take this fight to them. Stipulation for retrieving the swords from his brothers upon a successful return. Both Vigo and Ran are even desperate to prevent him from going on such a perilous mission, going so far as to offer him a sword right now. But Jyn sees right through their transparent ploy because if they were truly on his side from the start, they would have intervened in Miu and Anne's schemes. Rosa ultimately agrees to Jin's terms. She harbors a fear that Jyn might one day go down the same path as Luna, but for now, Rosa is simply pleased with her son's newfound strength. With the meeting concluding, Anne mocks him, attributing his success to nothing more than a lucky streak. She's even prepared to dispatch her personal underlings to finish the job he can't. Jyn pays their words no mind, hoping to make them eat their words upon his triumphant return. The intermediate class knights assigned to him from their faction are none other than the same thugs who had been harassing Jyn since day one. Quain is one of the three. Jyn puts on a neutral face, showing no outward distrust, but he's fully aware they're just biding their time to betray and eliminate him. The mission's objective is to infiltrate and secure specific items. 4 ancient relics are situated in the historic sites of Colin, a land that was once thriving but is now under the control of the Zyphals. Upon discovering the territory, they brutally massacred the indigenous population. They put on a facade of respecting Colin's people, but the grim reality is their continued subjugation by the sorcerers. While the Zyphals may operate under a guise of rationality, they possess an extreme capacity for cruelty, something Jyn is all too familiar with from his previous life. As a reincarnated soul, Jyn knows even the sorcerers were hunting a special relic in this land, a mirror that is boasted as a relic of the highest secrecy. A single journalist managed to expose the mirror's details through investigations and testimonies from the people of Colin. The mystical well of mana is so immense it can elevate a person's mana to the 7-star level, allowing the Zyles to forge an invincible army in the future. This is the kind of game-changing secret a reborn Manhwa hides, and Jyn wants to ensure that disastrous future never comes to pass. The artifact is located in the 3rd warehouse, which is heavily guarded by the Zayes. They'll need to be wary of the protective sentry spells cast over the area. Kazin offers his unwavering support, but Jyn obviously knows it's all a load of nonsense. Kazin's men suggest a straightforward and efficient travel plan, but Jyn has other plans. He has no time for their games, so he discreetly drugs their food with a potent sleeping agent. Their bodies soon slump to the ground. Jyn knew it was painfully obvious they intended to assassinate him from the very beginning. He proceeds alone, ready to complete the mission single-handedly. Our protagonist wastes no time getting into the action, sharply dodging enemy attacks and taking on 2 low-level combatants. They are quickly neutralized. Jyn then examines a seemingly mundane lock, which he picks with ease to find a magic circle etched upon the ground. Legend has it that only individuals with specific bloodlines can use these magic circles for transport. However, that particular rule only applies to demons and humans. Jyn decisively cuts the defeated guard's hand to extract the necessary blood. Using his own blood was an option, but it would have left a clear trail, compromising his mission. The magic circle activates upon contact with the blood, but unexpectedly, it begins to react violently, despite him using the guard's own blood. Jyn turns and realizes that the grunts he just took down are not human, but monsters in disguise. He leaps back to strike them with powerful wind magic. Jyn originally wanted to conceal his mana signature for a stealthy approach, but now he has no choice but to unleash his magic against these creatures. With his blade, he lands a sharp slash on the demon, but its raw power shoves him back. The moment Jyn unsheathes the holy blade, a wave of fear washes over the grotesque twins. To make matters worse, they regenerate at an astonishing speed. Jyn realizes instantly that he's not fighting ordinary demons. These creatures were human just moments before. He's in Zipful territory, a land teeming with sorcerers, and now these horrifying monsters with cryptic origins have appeared. The conclusion is painfully obvious. They are artificially created biological golems. This can only mean the Zipfuls are using the people of Cullen as test subjects in their own private lab facility. These abominations possess the speed and strength equivalent to a standard 4-star knight, so they're not impossible to beat. Jyn, with the insight of a reincarnated soul, narrows his focus to the golem's core, which he knows is always their most significant weakness. Jyn thrusts his blade clean through the creature's head, but it's not enough to put it down. The monster only becomes more enraged than it was before. Jyn then impales its abdomen, but even that isn't sufficient to stop it. The last vital spot must be the creature's heart. At long last, Jyn strikes true and defeats the golem, his heart aching with pity for the humans twisted into such monstrous forms. He dispatches the second golem in the exact same way, subduing both creatures. The pitiful remains of the once human forms seem to beg for release. Jyn granted it peace with a final, merciful blow. It's now crystal clear to him that there is an external, malevolent force transforming innocent people into bloodthirsty abominations. A burning rage fills his heart after uncovering the true horror of what this reborn Manhwa hides about the Zipfuls. The young swordsman can't help but wonder if his sisters were aware of this atrocity, and yet Jyn's spirit burns with the resolve to complete his mission. He knows he currently has no leverage against the Zipfuls, even if he were to expose their despicable schemes. The experimentation and creation of biological golems is a massive taboo, and exposing it would place incredible pressure on the clan's reputation. Jyn carefully safeguards the small amount of evidence he's gathered, planning to use it against the Zipfuls down the line. What's more, is that no sorcerers are rushing to attack him, which implies this is just a standard warehouse. Jyn's eyes fall upon several guarded relics. To get to them, he'll have to bypass their protective spells. His initial thought was to carefully dismantle each spell one by one, but after discovering the biological golems, Jyn opts for a more reckless approach, combining his shadow force with his potent flame magic. He completely obliterates the entire site, hoping to send a message the Zipfuls won't soon forget. Meanwhile, back at the Runandell castle, Anne and Mu are getting an earful from their elder sister, Luna. She's absolutely furious that they sent Jyn on such a deadly mission. Luna questions their audacity, asking if they truly intend to wage war against their youngest brother, who isn't even an official flag bearer yet. Luna demands that they reflect on their shameful actions, but Anne dares to fight back against her older sister, retorting that Luna has no right to talk when she's never shown any interest in the family's ranking system. Luna, with a smirk, happily informs them of Jyn's successful mission. He has already recovered the relics and reported the mission's completion to their mother. This, Luna explains, is precisely why she's scolding their foolishness. They've inadvertently allowed Jyn to appear even more capable than his current rank suggests. Before dismissing them, Luna reminds her dear sisters exactly who they're dealing with, someone who relishes paying back any slight twofold when it comes to revenge. She is genuinely fearing for their lives, knowing full well that Jyn could very well destroy them in the near future. Luna returns to her room after delivering the verbal beatdown of the century to her sisters. There, her maid shares shared the same concerns. After all, Jyn isn't the kind of person to simply let things go. He is destined to become immensely powerful with his current growth rate, a speed that suggests he will eclipse his sisters and likely remove them from his path entirely. Luna then requested an update on the individual who ordered the hit on Jyn, as it was abundantly clear that neither Anne nor Mu would be capable of such a heinous act. It wasn't the Htona twins either. Luna voiced her suspicions, pointing towards Joshua, Dias, and the other high-ranking siblings who couldn't easily be investigated due to their elevated status. For now, Luna advised a strategy of patience, noting that Jyn's incredible development was another reason she wasn't overly concerned for his safety. Speaking of which, our young master finally returned home, where a tearful Gilly greeted him, overwhelmed with relief that he was safe. Her devotion runs so deep that she would readily sacrifice her own life for his. Meanwhile, Jyn submitted his official report, carefully crafting it to suggest that an unknown external power had intervened on his behalf once again. More crucially, he revealed his true discoveries by presenting them with the golem's core. Murakhan initially dismissed it as a stroke of incredible luck, but even the great dragon was profoundly shocked upon learning they were biological golems. A grim realization dawned on Murakhan, who immediately suspected the Zipfuls were the masterminds behind their creation. He insisted on accompanying Jyn back to the Cullen territory, driven by a powerful and ominous feeling. Although our hero felt a sense of dread about returning, he knew he'd be fine with Murakhan watching his back. For now, Jyn hoped to fabricate a reason to infiltrate Zipful territory once more. As for the three troublemakers he had dealt with, they returned after his mission was complete, only to be promptly exiled from the Runandell clan. Jin's own training resumed as he focused on mastering the singing stones. Gilly urged him to cease training with the cadets, reminding him of his upcoming meeting with the Patriarch the following week, a development that left the Htona twins utterly stunned. It was speculated that he might become a reserve flag bearer to uphold his standing until his position could be formally recognized within the clan. Our protagonist was thrilled, finally able to operate independently. He wore a contented smile, knowing this newfound freedom would only accelerate his journey to becoming even stronger. Elsewhere, the patriarch was traveling with his entourage when Khan reported that their arrival at the Garden of Swords was approximately 2 hours away. The patriarch then remarked that his youngest son, a child of his later years, was a constant interruption to his training. He had intended to remain in seclusion within the Black Sea for a full 10 years, but these disturbances repeatedly pulled him away. He mused aloud, asking Khan just how many times it had been. Khan replied, observing that even back at the Storm Castle, he sensed the young master was extraordinary, but he hadn't grasped the full extent of his potential. Khan admitted that Jyn's accomplishments at the Garden of Swords had genuinely astonished him. Khan spoke of Jyn's ferocious spirit, noting that despite his age, the boy's eyes harbored a profound regret when he first met him at the Storm Castle. It was an unmistakable emotion, a secret sorrow that this reborn Manhwa hides from the world, but not from Khan's discerning gaze. He recalled how Jyn had immediately provoked his siblings upon arriving at the Garden of Swords, convinced that no one could have taught him such a tactic. The boy instinctively understood the art of overwhelming and shattering his opponents, Khan continued, reflecting that Jyn appears to possess a natural gift for dispatching his foes. Others saw this incredible potential, a power often seen in a reincarnated hero, and tried to stifle him by putting him in the most perilous situations. Yet, Jyn not only survived but returned stronger every time. Now, he stands as a 5-star warrior. Khan confessed that he was less intrigued by Jyn's recent missions at Mammoth or the Kholin Ruins, and far more fascinated by the very first task he had ever assigned him. He recalls how Jyn went head-to-head with a warrior from the White Wolf tribe and emerged victorious. At first, Magna assumed Jyn would use his underlings as cannon fodder to take down the tribesmen, but to everyone's astonishment, Jyn handled the entire affair by himself. In doing so, he proved the conviction behind the beliefs he had proclaimed from the very beginning. Knighton then questions if the patriarch genuinely believes Jyn defeated the White Wolf warrior all on his own. The patriarch confirms it, though he clarifies that, technically speaking, Jyn didn't achieve the feat completely by himself. He concludes that Jyn is a fascinating young man, noting that he'll have to get the full story from Jyn the next time they speak. Before long, the caravan pulls up to the palace. A woman is waiting at the entrance, informing him that they have been expecting his arrival. The patriarch greets her, praising her for her diligent efforts. She humbly responds that he had already arranged everything, leaving very little for her to handle. He remarks that if his adult children were actually capable of managing things by themselves, he never would have needed to leave the Black Sea. He observes that the guests they are receiving today will be completely fixated on him, and asks if this won't create complications for their children. Roser concurs and ushers him inside, mentioning she has prepared his favorite meal. He smiles and commends her excellent work, saying he is greatly looking forward to it. Once inside, the patriarch's eyes land on the 2 swords that Jyn Runandell had been carrying. He calls out to Ran and Vigo, who answer immediately. He questions if they gave the youngest son the swords he had permitted them to claim as gifts. Vigo clarifies that the youngest actually took the swords from them. They had made a deal to let him keep the blades on the condition that he succeeded in his mission at the Kholin Ruins. The patriarch then places a hand on Vigo's shoulder and says, "That's fine, but I expect you to take them back from him. The youngest is a crafty one." With a knowing smirk, he quips that sometimes he wonders if Jyn is even his real son. A short while later, the patriarch is standing with Jyn by a window. He comments that this must be Jin's very first banquet. Jyn confirms this, reflecting that as a reincarnated soul in his past life by other families, all thanks to his master. This, however, is his first time ever attending a banquet thrown by the main family branch. Previously, on the rare occasions such events were held, he was forced to stay hidden like a fugitive, a dark secret this reborn Manhwa hides. But now, he stands proudly as the guest of honor right next to his father. The patriarch notes that their family seldom hosts such grand events. He explains that they only hold banquets for occasions that are genuinely worth celebrating, implying that Jyn's accomplishments are of great significance. Jyn Runandell thanks him for the high praise. The patriarch then asks him just how many guests he believes will be in attendance tonight. Jyn hazards a guess of around 1,000 people. The patriarch confirms Jin's guess is correct, explaining that they were informed about 1,000 guests would be attending the banquet, which is an increase of roughly 200 people since the last one they held 7 years prior. He then asks Jyn if he grasped what that number truly signifies. Jyn replies that it indicates the Runandell family's power and influence has expanded over the last 7 years. While other families might throw a banquet with 1,000 guests on occasion, every single one of the 1,000 attendees here tonight is a powerful and influential figure. Jyn reflects that while the family's authority has been growing, he has spent the last 7 years dedicated solely to his training and culling demonic beasts in the Black Sea. Despite his isolation, the family's influence has only continued to grow, as he stands alone as the sole Genesis Knight of this era. However, this also implies that if he were to suddenly disappear, a vast majority of the people at this very banquet would likely turn their backs on the Runandell family. Jyn had to acknowledge this harsh reality. Without his father, the Runandell family would not command nearly as much authority. Although their family is one of the 2 great powers alongside the Zippel family, the fragile truth a reincarnated, reborn Manhwa hides is that if his father were to disappear, the gap in military might between the 2 houses would widen dramatically. In such a scenario, the Zippel family would almost certainly become the dominant power. Jyn mused that if he were absent and people abandoned their family, leaving them should they ever become vulnerable to oppression by the Zippel family, he would disown them entirely. Taken aback, the patriarch demands an explanation. Jyn elaborates that if the Runandell family's collapse was a direct result of his absence, it would only prove the utter incompetence of the next patriarch. He asserts that he has no intention of suffering such a futile demise under the command of a weak leader. He then shifts the topic, inquiring about the very weaknesses their family possesses. The patriarch responds by asking precisely which weaknesses he is referring to. Jyn nods, explaining that in exchange for returning the sword he had confiscated from his brother Vigo, he demanded to see the family's private commission contracts, ledgers that only flag bearers are permitted to peruse. From these contracts, Jyn discovered that the head of the Vera family had swindled the emperor himself and siphoned the empire's treasures, yet still had the audacity to attend the banquet without a shred of shame. The ever-cunning Vera family had recently commissioned them to eliminate several magicians from the Zippel clan. Meanwhile, Harold's own daughter sold her family's precious heirlooms to fuel her gambling addiction and then requested the Runandell family's assistance in recovering them, even though she has yet to settle the commission fee. Jyn explains that with just a cursory glance at these contracts, he has already uncovered a multitude of potential leverage points. The sheer number of secrets this reborn Manhwa hides is staggering, and these documents contain far more weapons that only my mother and I are permitted to access. The patriarch then asks if Jyn is suggesting that, even in his absence, the Runandell family could be protected by wielding the knowledge contained within these very contracts. Jyn confirms that if a patriarch who is not a Genesis Knight were to lead the family, their very survival would depend on the new leader's prowess in negotiation. The patriarch concedes that this is true, but points out that they are not the only ones burdened with such weaknesses. The Zippel family possesses just as many. Jyn concurs, stating he is certain of it, but adds that the Zippel family could never justify using such underhanded tactics. The patriarch questions, and why not Jyn? Jyn explains that portraying the role of the villain is a responsibility that falls squarely upon the Runandell family. Nevertheless, if the next patriarch fails to wield these weapons effectively, despite having such a vast arsenal, Jyn would disown the family without a moment's hesitation. He then adds that he would immediately begin preparing to exact his own revenge on the Zippel family, no matter how many years it might take. The patriarch chuckles, remarking on the subject of revenge, and noting that he understands Jyn's perspective completely. He adds that remaining alive simply to exact revenge is not such a terrible fate. Reflecting further, he notes that his other children lack the sheer audacity to even presume the Runandell family's downfall. It's as if Jyn is a reincarnated soul, possessing a will they cannot comprehend in his presence. Instead, they would rather make conceited remarks or simply whine. The youngest, Jyn, however, is unequivocally clear in his convictions. He voiced his convictions with calm resolve, musing on the bittersweet fact that Jyn was a son of his twilight years. It was as if Jyn was reincarnated with all of Luna's prodigious talent, Mary's untamed spirit, and a warrior's glint in his eyes. He estimated 10 years. 15 years, at the absolute most, that was the window he had to safeguard the patriarchal throne. He inwardly smiled, realizing he might just be around long enough, able to watch and see if the youngest will grow powerful enough to turn the entire line of succession on its head. Changing the subject, he remarked that the majority of their esteemed guests had already arrived. "Let us begin making our way inside," he commanded. Jyn Runandell nodded in agreement. The patriarch added that he had a matter of importance to discuss with Jyn once the festivities concluded, instructing him to wait until summoned. As he waited, Jyn Runandell's thoughts drifted to the qualifications for becoming a reverse flag bearer. It appeared this path would require him to temporarily depart from the family after the banquet's conclusion, making the 4 days of celebration feel incredibly drawn out. Just as this thought crossed his mind, Heinz approached, addressing the patriarch. "What is it?" the patriarch inquired. Heinz promptly reported that guests had arrived, but they were unannounced and had not sent an invitation. The patriarch's mind immediately raced, wondering who these gatecrashers could be. Could it be the Zippels? Heinz confirmed his suspicion. Yes, a party of 5, including their second-in-command, had appeared. Andre Zippel, along with 4 other members of his clan, were at their gates. The patriarch scoffed in disdain, muttering that Andre was an impertinent fool. He then gave a sharp order, tell Andre Zippel to get lost and permit only his family to enter, but he was not to deliver the message himself. "Have the servants do it," he commanded. Heinz bowed low and departed to carry out the order, while Jyn Runandell, observing this, reflected on the situation. He knew that while Andre's arrival was outrageously rude, turning him away was a power move that hides a deeper political trap, a massive dishonor. The patriarch glanced at him, asking if he found the treatment too severe. "No, father," Jyn replied, "I find it rather refreshing." He explained his belief. The second Andre allows his anger to take over and storms off with his kin, he would be actively defying the explicit permission the Runandell patriarch granted for his family to enter. Such a blatant act of disrespect is unthinkable within the Frus Garden of Swords, and it was playing out exactly as he'd predicted. The patriarch added grimly that Andre would either obey his command or find himself returning home without the use of his legs. With that settled, he strode forward, declaring it was time to commence the banquet. A short while later, the patriarch stood upon the terrace, his voice booming as he thanked everyone for their attendance. He introduced himself as Siren, the patriarch of the Runandell clan, and announced that he could enjoy this grand feast thanks to being blessed with such a capable son in his later years. He then gestured towards Jyn, asking everyone to give a round of applause for his youngest son, Jyn Runandell. As the crowd applauded, he began to explain that there were only 2 rules to be followed at a Runandell banquet. The first rule, he declared, is that if you must fight while drinking, the Guardian Knights will personally escort you to the arena. The second rule is that the loser must concede defeat, and the victor must show mercy, for this is, after all, a celebration. Jyn Runandell surveyed the room, reflecting that this was no mere party. It was a congregation of party Imer, 1,000 individuals, each holding significant sway across the entire continent. These powerful figures were all interconnected in a complex web of alliances and rivalries. He mused that at a typical social event, they would likely trade veiled insults and then depart. But this was a banquet in the Garden of Swords, a setting straight out of a reborn manhwa where the dynamics were raw and far more intense. He knew that, as long as they abided by the 2 rules his father had set, they couldn't go so far as to eliminate their rivals, but they were certainly free to, permitted to challenge them harshly, even establishing official superiority. The patriarch then encourages everyone to enjoy the festivities themselves. Jyn Runandell internally remarks on what an eccentric clan they are. His father advises him to have a good time, suggesting that if he happens to find someone who catches his eye, he should bring them into the fold. However, he sternly reminds Jyn that he is forbidden from challenging anyone weaker than himself unless they have directly insulted both him and the Runandell clan. Jyn affirms this, declaring that he is well aware he cannot afford to lose under any circumstances whatsoever. As his father turns to leave, Jyn asserts that the path forward is obvious. Should he lose, he will simply reclaim everything that is rightfully his. Not just Bray, but his nanny as well. He then bows deeply, affirming that he will keep his father's words in mind. He reflects on this being the first real conversation he's ever had with his father, a moment his reincarnated self could have never imagined. In his previous life, he admits to himself that it was a convincing father-son exchange, but forming any sort of genuine bond or playing the part of a loving son isn't in his plans. The truth this reborn Manhwa hides is that his sole focus is to surpass his father. That is his one and only objective. Later, as Jyn mingles at the party, he is approached by Htona and Deatona Runandell. Deatona congratulates him on achieving the 5-star rank and politely asks if they might accompany him for a short while. Jyn agrees, then inquires about their progress with the clear stone training. Htona mentions that it's been improving significantly, especially since they switched to the weapon their uncle recommended. Jyn offers a positive response, thinking to himself that he can make his exit after this pleasant interaction concludes. Htona simply agrees, saying, "Right, of course." Just at that moment, Ken arrives and formally introduces himself to young Master Jyn as a member of the Ken clan. Both Htona and Deatona Runandell extend their greetings as well. Deatona then announces his departure, and Jyn Runandell wishes him the best of luck with his training. After Deatona offers his thanks, Jyn mentions to Ken that he had often heard tales of his heroic deeds while growing up. Ken replies with a laugh that Jyn is making him blush. But at that very instant, Huger appears from behind and violently grabs Jyn by the hair, calling out his name. Huger remarks that he'd been quite curious about the prodigy who managed to achieve the rank of a 5-star warrior at the tender age of 15. He then sneers that Jyn truly does look like a mere child, at least 10 years his junior. He introduces himself with a smirk, saying, "A pleasure to meet you. The name's Huger." Jyn responds with a coolly polite, "Yes, a pleasure to meet you as well." Huger then sarcastically asks if Jyn isn't just the most impressive kid, wondering aloud if he's deliberately trying to make him look like a complete fool. With a rude demeanor, he reminds Jyn that while he may be a Runandell, Huger is still his senior in the world of martial arts. He adds condescendingly that he's simply proud of his junior and advises him not to behave like a moron. Jyn, with icy calmness, warns Huger of the Tuco clan to listen very carefully. He states that Huger's actions just now were a grave insult to every single person who has shown him respect thus far. At that moment, Deatona Runandell arrives and states that if Huger insists on bringing up the matter of seniority, he ought to be far more considerate. Huger demands to know what he means by that. Deatona calmly explains that the first and second flag bearers of the Ken clan, the Dragon King Knights, and the Black King mercenaries are all, in fact, senior to him. He points out that Huger should have observed the way those very seniors treated Jyn with the utmost respect, and that he should have recognized his error and immediately apologized. Deatona then adds that since he had given Huger, consider this a warning, he'll let this one slide. Ken steps in, pointing out that Huger's life was just spared by the young Master Jyn, and he should probably heed Jin's counsel. Another man chimes in, remarking that Huger's notoriously big mouth was destined to land him in hot water eventually, agreeing it's wiser to drop the matter without escalating it further. At that, Huger concedes that if his senior has spoken, he owes his juniors an apology. He then asks them to forgive his transgression and formally requests that Jyn accept his apology. Jyn Runandell simply replies, "Of course." Just then, Luna Runandell approaches him. She remarks with a smile that he certainly has a talent for making enemies, adding that it would be refreshing if he could just act like a regular child for once. He counters that today, he is the face of the Runandell clan. She concedes his point with a nod and clinks her wine glass against his. Then she poses a question. What would he have done if Huger had actually challenged him to a duel? Noting that Huger appears to be at least a 6-star warrior, Jyn calmly answers that had it come to that, he is certain the Tuco clan's patriarch and elders would have stepped in, as they have been observing him for quite some time. Luna looks impressed. She notes that he even factored them into his assessment of the situation and playfully asks if he learned some secret techniques for manipulating people from a noble mentor, or perhaps he's a reincarnated soul with ancient wisdom. She suggests that if there's someone who teaches such cunning, it wouldn't be a bad idea to keep them close. Since mastering the sword is their paramount focus, she wonders aloud if anything else truly holds any importance. He replies that it might be difficult for her to grasp, but as the family's scorned youngest child, he needs far more than just sword skills to survive. It's a classic scenario where a hero in a reborn manhwa hides his true potential. She asks if that's really the case, mentioning that he seems exceptionally talented and sharp, which might be why he was nearly taken out at Storm Castle. He can't help but wonder which of his siblings might have recognized his true potential so early on. She then tells him that she's attending the banquet primarily to congratulate him, but confesses these formal events aren't her scene and she'd much rather be somewhere more lively. He asks if she is departing already. She confirms with a yes, teasing that he isn't quite tall enough to be her dance partner just yet. She promises that when he's a bit older, they will dance together, and she'll even take him to a wonderful place. Undeterred, he begins to dance with her then and there and says that he is very much looking forward to that day. She then suggests that before she departs, she ought to leave a message for the others, just as he did earlier. He asks what she means by that. She pulls him into a hug, explaining that by doing this, everyone will clearly understand just how much she values him, and people will now think twice before being discourteous, knowing she's watching over him. "I'll see you later," she says warmly. He responds, "Yes, see you later." Meanwhile, the translator Bouvard Gaston exclaims he's so envious he'd love to bump heads with Lady Luna as well. He declares that he must compose a poem for Lady Luna this very day, and that he plans to serenade her with it all night long. An annoyed Viscio Giuliano tells him to pipe down, but Margella Giuliano advises Viscio not to be so severe, pointing out that this could be a matter of great importance for Mr. Bouvard, because Mr. Bouvard has been keeping him occupied. Thanks to his distraction, she's been able to enjoy the party and its fated meetings in peace. She suggests that they should afford him a little more respect. The translator, Bouvard Gaston, deeply moved by Margella's insight, declares that as expected of Miss Margella, she truly understands him, and he, Bouvard, would be honored to be at her service. She simply thanks him. Elsewhere, Jyn Runandell finds it a nuisance to play the part of the master at this gathering, wondering where those blasted zips have scurried off to. It's getting slightly vexing. Is he truly expected to search for them himself? At that very moment, Sir Cirrus Androma approaches him and inquires if the young lady might request a drink with the ascendant star of the Runcandle clan. Jyn Runandell turns, asking her identity. She introduces herself as Cirrus Androma from the Hidden Palace, stating that it is a profound honor to meet him. He acknowledges her, recognizing her as the daughter of the Hidden Palace's master, and insists the honor is all his as he pours a drink into her glass. She remarks that he is only 15, the same age as she is, and asks how he could have possibly cultivated such martial prowess at his age, professing her envy for the Runcandle family's blessed physique. He responds that, for a reincarnated soul, it is indeed a blessing. He considers it a gift, but quickly adds that the Hidden Palace is a blessed lineage in its own right. He can hardly fathom how dearly the master of the Hidden Palace must value her. She confirms her father's deep affection, noting that unlike someone who is not an only child, she stands as her father's sole daughter. She then pauses, asking if her comment was perhaps too forward. Jyn Runandell assures her it was not, observing that it is widely known he is the youngest son with numerous older brothers. He admits that he is actually envious of her position, explaining that having a multitude of siblings can be quite exhausting. He finds it peculiar that she has yet to mention Mammoth, even though he is certain she recognized him. It is difficult to believe she failed to, despite the lingering traces of ash on his face. She then states that she has a question for him. He simply nods, inviting her to ask. She gets straight to the point, asking about his injured leg. He replies that it is perfectly fine now, thanks to a wonderful individual who personally applied medicine for him. He adds that he doesn't even know how he could possibly repay such a favor. She remarks that he is more shameless than she had anticipated and then demands to know why he was at the Moonlight Well in Mammoth. She adds that she believes he owes her an explanation. He coolly asks why she believes she is entitled to one. She explains that her subordinate's failure to capture the magic-wielding terrorist wounded her pride immensely. It made her question whether the young man she allowed to leave might, in fact, have been the very culprit. He scoffs at the notion of magic, pointing out that he is a Runcandle through and through. He asks pointedly if he truly strikes her as a suspect, reminding her that she should be intimately familiar with his clan's principles. She replies that she does not suspect him directly, but it would raise significant concerns if he were on a Runcandle mission and had to hire a magician because he was incapable of handling it alone. She adds that among the guests at the inn, the only ones who could have been a legitimate target for the Runcandle clan were the members of the Hidden Palace. As the captain of the Hidden Palace's 7 swords, she cannot simply overlook such a coincidence. He inwardly realizes that she is mistakenly assuming he was targeting her people, and while she is not entirely incorrect, given that he did injure some of them during his attempt to kill Auro, he knows the full truth of what this reborn Manhwa hides is a secret she could never uncover. He then asks aloud if everything she has mentioned isn't just baseless speculation. She challenges him, asking if he will deny it until the very end, before declaring that if that is his stance, she has her own method. She threatens to drag him into the arena, beat him into submission, and spit on his despicable face. She then formally challenges him to a duel. He calmly replies that his father gave him strict orders not to fight against an opponent who seems to be his inferior, but since she was so determined to clash, he felt he had no other option but to oblige. Later, Jyn Runandell stepped onto the designated battleground, where a soldier inquired if he was there for the duel. He affirmed that he was, then instructed the soldier that all others were to depart. Only the medics were permitted to stay, and he requested 2 well-crafted swords. The soldier acknowledged the unspoken command, confirming they would cordon off the arena until the duel concluded. Jyn Runandell surmised that following the midnight confrontation, a crowd of enthusiasts and curious spectators would surely begin to assemble. Because Cirrus Endorma was the daughter of the Hidden Palace, it would be an act of profound cruelty to vanquish her before a public audience. It was then Cirrus proposed they make a pact before commencing their battle. He inquired about the nature of this promise she was suggesting, and she stated that if she were victorious, he would have to tell her every detail of what transpired in Mammoth that day, with no falsehoods. He consented, but on the condition that if he won, she must agree that their encounter on this day never happened. She commented that he clearly had something to conceal before daring him to make the first move. He lunged forward to attack, only for her to counter with a blindingly fast strike of her own blade. He instantly recognized this as a special ability, one unique to the Endorma bloodline, the myriad ice blades. He was taken aback, not anticipating she would unleash her secret art so early in the duel. He inwardly cursed his situation. For someone supposedly reincarnated with immense knowledge, it was ironic he hadn't yet learned his own clan's secret techniques, leaving him wondering what his next move should be. She scoffed at his predicament, declaring it wasn't her concern, and pressed her assault. They both clashed in a flurry of steel. She noted internally that he was indeed a true 5-star warrior. At first, it had appeared as though he was just barely managing to fend off her onslaught, but as their battle intensified, his genuine proficiency began to shine through. Nevertheless, she was confident that the 1-star gap between them could be easily bridged by executing the 3rd form of the myriad ice blades. She resolved that being the weaker of the two with less stamina, she could not afford a prolonged engagement. The moment he tried to launch a counteroffensive, after deciphering her patterns, she planned to shift her strategy and bring the duel to a swift conclusion. Jyn acknowledged that while Cirrus Endorma was a 4-star knight capable of wielding the myriad ice blades, her fundamental attack and defense were still inferior to his own. Sensing she was preparing for a decisive blow to turn the tide of battle, he correctly guessed she would rely on her secret technique, but he couldn't accurately gauge the sheer power the myriad ice blades would unleash. He figured that in a situation like this, he might be forced to use his own trump card, a secret skill that many a reborn Manhwa hides, and one of the many he had mastered at Storm Castle. Of all the secret arts he knew, he acquired this particular one for being the most devastating. She lunged at him, declaring the fight was over, and unleashed the 3rd form of the myriad ice blades to finish him. He parried her assault with his sword, observing that the ice fragments were infused with a highly condensed aura, and a smirk played on his lips. She caught his reaction and thought he was laughing at her, but she had already unleashed Avalanche, a technique of such immense power that not even a prodigy who reached 5-star status at the age of 15 should be capable of withstanding it. And yet, a strange sense of unease crept over her for some inexplicable reason. He then launched his own attack, his blade aimed directly for her eyes, compelling her to evade and retaliate. He was momentarily stunned by the sudden eruption of his own magical power. He questioned whether he should have employed a technique other than the Attila family's Stormblade, suddenly realizing its catastrophic force was far too much for a 4-star knight like Cirrus Endorma to withstand. Had she failed to dodge, she could have been gravely wounded, or worse. Despite this, he had still attacked her. She drops to her knees, grappling with the stark realization of how much she values her own life, her fear allowing her to instinctively dodge a fatal strike. He walks over, asking if she's all right and apologizing for nearly taking her life. He muses that both Cirrus and Endorma must have heard his warning, yet they made no move to evade the Stormblade. Still, regardless of her immense pride and honor, Cirrus would have dodged the attack if their roles were reversed, and he believes she would have advised him to do the exact same thing. He suggests they leave the matter there, adding that there is no need to dwell on it any further. He silently wonders if this will help put her mind at ease. She then takes out a small medicine box, noting that he has a scratch on his face. She offers to repay him for saving her life by applying some ointment to the cut. He asks if she isn't underestimating the value of her own life, given that she is the sole heir to the Ice Palace. She replies that this is the very life she once pleaded for, and so she is resolved to cherish this second chance and assured him there was no need to worry for her. As she readied herself to depart, she proposed that they treat this day as their very first meeting, promising to see him on the morrow. The scene then transitions to the subsequent day, where Jyn Runandell was sipping wine, noting the crowd had thinned considerably compared to the previous day. He mused that since the duels were scheduled to begin, the true festivities were likely just getting underway. With fewer people around, he hoped for an opportunity to finally encounter the Zippel delegation. He considered how all the guests from the Zippel clan were between 15 and 20 years of age, matching his own. This presented a perfect chance to gauge how his own skills and magic stacked up against theirs. He briefly contemplated asking them about Colin, but quickly decided that such a move would be unwise at this moment. He reasoned that once he secured the position of a reserve flag bearer, he would have far more freedom to pursue such investigations. He figured he could delve into the secrets of Colin with Mirren's assistance, whose expertise should make it simple to pinpoint the Fountain of Mana, a discovery that would halt the Zippel clan's scheme of mass-producing mages. Having been reincarnated, he was absolutely determined to stay one step ahead of them this time. His eyes then fell upon Mirren, sitting quietly in her feline form. As Marjola Yano began to play with her, asking why a cat was present at a Runandell banquet and inquiring about its owner, she gently lifted the pendant and read the inscription aloud. Discovering the name was Butterfly. Jyn Runandell then confirmed, "That's Butterfly Runandell." Marjola mused aloud, wondering if Jyn had been the one to bestow such a name. Just then, Baratin Zippel approached, exclaiming that he knew he would find Jyn if he simply followed the cat. He declared their long-awaited meeting had finally arrived and expressed his astonishment that Jyn could have possibly forgotten him. Jyn Runandell, playing the part of a protagonist in a story where the reborn Manhwa hides its hero's past, simply asked who he was, causing Barden to react with shock. At their very reunion, and questioned how such a memory could have faded, he insisted that he had been thinking of Jyn every single day and offered to refresh his memory, prompting him to guess a name that began with the letter B. Finding the entire exchange peculiar, Marjola Yano decided to take Mirren and depart from the scene. Baratin Zippel pressed on, asking if Jyn remembered him now, to which Jyn Runandell flatly replied, "Nope." An exasperated Barden tried a different approach, reminding him of their supposed first encounter at the Middle Kingdom's teleportation gate. Jyn Runandell maintained his ignorance, stating he still had no recollection. Utterly exasperated, Baratin then grabbed him by the shoulder, admitting his memory isn't quite what it used to be, and urges him to pay close attention, and to remember this time, formally introducing himself as Baron Zippel. Jyn Runandell retorts that if Baron is so adamant about feigning ignorance, it's obviously because Jyn wishes to keep their connection a secret. He questions why Baron can't take the hint and simply leave him be, even grabbing his wrist to underscore his point. Zippel, completely oblivious to the subtext, then asks if Jyn recognizes him now. Jyn internally questions how this dense fool could possibly achieve the rank of an N-star magician by 30 and be designated the next head of the Zippel clan. A future Jyn, having been reincarnated, found baffling. Baron carries on, claiming he was searching high and low for Jyn all day yesterday and had even spent the last 2 hours looking for him today without a single trace. Jyn counters that while the banquet hall is indeed large, it is still only a single hall. How in the world did he manage to get lost for 2 full hours? Baron explains that if he were permitted to use magic, he would have located Jyn in a fraction of the time, but this was Runandell territory, where the use of magic is strictly forbidden. Jyn wonders if Baron Zippel was lying or just hopelessly awful with directions, ultimately concluding it was likely the latter. Baron then beams, saying he's thrilled to see Jyn and asks if it has truly been 5 years since they last met. He also remarks that he can't believe Jyn is already a 5-star warrior, noting that he always had a feeling Jyn was destined for great things. Baron adds that he hasn't been slacking off either, proudly declaring he's already a 6-star magician, an entire level beyond Jyn's swordsmanship. Jyn finds it difficult to accept that the supposed greatest prodigy of the Zippel family, Baron, is only a 6-star magician at the age of 18. Jyn thinks to himself that if he were in Baron's position, he would have already broken through to the 7th star. He also wonders if this is all an act, like a trope, where the hero in a reborn Manhwa hides his true power. Baron Zippel, however, notices Jyn's skeptical expression and completely misinterprets it, assuming Jyn is moved by the sheer effort he put into the search. He tells Jyn he eagerly awaits the day they can finally cross swords and urges him to train hard to catch up. Jyn ultimately concludes that Baron isn't concealing his rank. If it's really true that Baron Zippel only managed to reach the 6-star level by 18 years of age, then after the current patriarch, Celiac Zippel, Baron is the one closest to achieving true mastery over magic. This presents a perfect opportunity for Jyn to objectively gauge his own potential. Jyn mentions that he's said it before, but he again urges Baron to just keep his mouth shut and save his breath. Baron Zippel claims he's merely repeating his father's words. He argues that anyone in his position would say the exact same thing and then questions why the Zippel family even came to the banquet uninvited, all while Bouvard Gaston discreetly observes their tense conversation. Baron reveals that he is the very reason they came, admitting he had been pestering his uncle Andre relentlessly about the need to meet Jyn. Jyn thinks it's utterly absurd that the vice-patriarch would charge headfirst into enemy territory just to satisfy a child's tantrum. Baron mentions that he and his party just so happened to be vacationing in the Hor region when he heard news of the banquet and took it as a sign of destiny. Jyn asks if that's the whole story, and Baron confirms that it is. Jyn then tells him to be grateful this is a banquet, ordering him to stay quiet and leave when it's over. Baron starts to ask, "Aren't you?" is too cold and points out that his own father showed mercy to Jyn's uncle, then proposes a pact. Jyn must promise to one day crash a Zippel banquet without any warning. Jyn muses aloud, wondering what would happen if he were to orchestrate a bit of chaos at the banquet. Baron reassures him that even if he did, he would honor their agreement and would not take his life. He even adds that if a brawl erupted, he would simply remain a spectator. Jyn scoffs, calling him a fool for even proposing such a ridiculous idea. When Baron asks why, Jyn explains it's because a rather distasteful individual has been throwing sneaky glances his way for some time. Jyn then turns his attention to Bouvard Gaston, asking if there was something on his mind. Bouvard immediately asks when Lady Luna might grace them with her presence again. Jyn repeats the question, his voice laced with disbelief. Bouvard clarifies, yes, Lady Luna, and wonders if she has plans to return. explaining his intention to present her with a book, a collection of poems he'd penned all night, pouring his supposed love onto every page. He's convinced that once she reads it, Lady Luna will see he's a far better man than his appearance suggests, and audaciously hints at the possibility of him becoming Jyn's brother-in-law in the near future. Baron, utterly flabbergasted by this declaration, chokes and spits out his wine. Jyn coolly remarks that it appears someone needs to be taught a lesson, and addressing Bouvard as his dear guest, he tears the book to shreds. Bouvard cries out in protest, demanding to know what Jyn is doing. Jyn states that not only did Bouvard speak his sister's name so freely, but he also had the sheer nerve to call himself his brother-in-law, implying that the great Runandell family must look utterly pathetic in his eyes. With a cold command, Jyn orders a soldier to drag the man to the arena, and the guard immediately acknowledges the order. Bouvard Gaston lets out a nervous laugh, trying to backtrack on the brother-in-law comment while addressing Jyn as young master and questioning the sudden escalation. As two soldiers seize him, Bouvard begins to plead for them to let him go, insisting he was merely expressing his love, a right every man possesses. He questions how Jyn could treat a guest this way, completely disregarding the sacred rules of hospitality, and wonders how Jyn could be so offended by him simply admiring his sister's beauty. The soldiers then unceremoniously slam him to the ground. Jyn declares that they will settle this with a bare-knuckle fight, leaving Bouvard to wonder why Jyn is reacting so violently. All he did was call his sister beautiful, so why the extreme response? He starts to panic, worrying that if Jyn discovers he was the one who altered those Zippel members 5 years ago, the situation could become infinitely worse. This whole scene is like a reborn Manhwa hides a terrible secret. But Jyn Runandell simply repeats that they'll settle this with their fists, calmly removing his coat in preparation. Visha Ulano, watching from afar, is stunned by this development, while Marjalao, standing beside her, asks what the commotion is about. She remarks that it seems Bouvard and Jyn are about to duel, calling Bouvard an absolute fool and suggesting they get a closer look at the action. Cirrus and Dorma note that she'd been trying to provoke Jyn into a duel all banquet long, and now he's fighting some nobody instead. She wonders why a powerhouse like Jyn, who seems almost reincarnated with his skill, is even wasting his time on a weakling like Bouvard. Meanwhile, Baron Zippel muses that begging his uncle to let him attend this banquet was an excellent decision. He certainly hadn't anticipated meeting the heir to the Ice Palace. He offers a polite greeting, expressing his pleasure at finally meeting her. He waves him off disdainfully, then grandly announces that the main event of the banquet, the rising star of the Runandell family, young Master Jyn, is set to participate in a duel. He then asks who exactly is facing young Master Jyn, stating that he's never laid eyes on this individual before, wondering aloud if the opponent is some reclusive master. Baron Zippel notes that the man arrived as part of the Ulano family's group, suggesting that despite his ordinary appearance, he might be a highly skilled combatant. Bouvard Gaston then steps forward, requesting that young Master Jyn of the Runandell family allow him the opportunity to formally introduce himself before they begin, asking if that small courtesy is at least permissible. Jyn Runandell responds with a sharp punch to Bouvard's face, commanding him to shut his mouth and saying he doesn't even want to hear his name. Enraged, Bouvard Gaston retaliates, unleashing his aura and launching an attack on Jyn. Jyn notices the assault and calmly assesses that Bouvard's aura level seems to be around 6 stars. Cirrus and Dorma remark that young Master Jyn has challenged someone stronger than himself, observing that the portly man's primary focus appears to be combat. Baron Zippel comments that it would be a terrible shame if he were to break Bouvard Gaston. Bouvard lands a punch on Jyn's face and declares that Jyn dares to lay a hand on him with such feeble abilities, promising to make him weep on the ground, begging for forgiveness. In response, Jyn Runandell unleashes a flurry of punches on Bouvard, stating that it's already over. Baron Zippel comments that Jyn expertly launched a series of attacks right after getting his opponent to lower his guard. He praises Jyn for his impressive skill, saying this is exactly the performance he expected from him. Marielle Yano turns to Visho Ulano, expressing her utter confusion over young Master Jyn's actions and questioning why he's continuing when the victor has clearly been decided. She also finds it hard to believe Jyn would continue beating someone who is clearly lost. It's as if this reborn Manhwa hides a monstrous side to him. Visho Ulano agrees that it is indeed unfair for young Master Jyn to pick on a weaker opponent and asks if Marielle expects him to just sit back and watch, especially since Jyn is supposed to be their friend. He adds that he is certainly not weaker than young Master Jyn. She tells him that his younger sister is disappointed in his hesitation and that she'd like him to teach young Master Jyn a lesson, using a far more honorable approach than the one Jyn is taking. He asks if she truly wants him to challenge young Master Jyn to a fight. A blonde-haired boy comments on how fired up she seems to be, while a brown-haired boy suggests that Visho should just listen to his sister. Visho Ulano gives a firm nod and steps forward. He calls out to young Master Jyn, asking him to put down Bouvard Gaston and face him in a fair fight instead. Moments later, Visho Ulano and Jyn Runandell stand before each other, swords drawn. Jyn considers the impending duel against a 7-star knight. For someone who has been reincarnated, whether he wins or loses, this fight holds significant merit for him. Additionally, gaining first-hand experience against the Ulano family's swordsmanship will be a truly valuable learning opportunity. The previous patriarch of the Ulano family was a man even Jin's own father recognized as a formidable warrior. Nevertheless, Marielle is quite an amusing young lady, willing to put her brother in such a difficult position just to witness this fight. He remarks that Visho Ulano seems to hold his sister in very high regard. Visho responds that it should be obvious. Jyn Runandell, who also has a sister, acknowledges that he understands completely. Visho Ulano acknowledges the sentiment, stating that he too cherishes his own sister and would appreciate it if Jyn kept his attendance in check from this point forward. He then clarifies that the man Jyn just disciplined is not a servant, but rather a companion. Visho then questions if Bouvard Gaston might have made some kind of error. Jyn Runandell explains that Bouvard Gaston was present at the banquet to assist his sister, who has mobility issues, but his particular skills don't quite align with the standards required at a Runandell banquet. Jyn further reflects on Bouvard's capabilities, concluding that regardless of what transpired, he is convinced there was no malicious intent and asks Visho to overlook his actions this time. Privately, Jyn Runandell contemplates Bouvard Gaston's true identity as the transformation sorcerer, a secret that this world, much like a story where a reincarnated, reborn Manhwa hides its secrets, keeps well concealed. He questions the relationship between Visho and Bouvard Gaston, recalling his previous life. He is absolutely certain there was never any mention of the Uliano family having connections to Gaston at the time of his arrest. Jyn wonders if Visho knows that Bouvard is the transformation sorcerer. What are the implications? He curses under his breath, realizing he's finally found Bouvard, only to face even more questions. He steels himself, resolving not to get distracted, particularly when confronting a 7-star knight like Visho. Visho Ulano suggests they both give it their all, expressing his hope to learn a great deal from Jyn. As Visho launches an attack, Jyn parries his strike. From this one exchange alone, Jyn deduces that Visho's power isn't that of a true 7-star knight, and his swordsmanship is on par with his uncle Zed's. However, the trajectory of Visho's blade is still something beyond Jin's current ability to comprehend. Onlookers begin to comment on the duel, with one noting, "Young Master Jyn was swiftly put on the defensive," remarks Baron Zippel. Another spectator counters, "But he's holding his ground quite well, wouldn't you say? The Uliano family's sword style is famous for its deceptive and unorthodox techniques." One adds. Another chimes in, "Anyone who's ever faced that tricky style would never wish to experience it a second time." Biden Zippel scoffs at their remarks, thinking to himself that they understand nothing. He reflects that if the Uliano family's blade is like a cunning serpent, then the Runandell family's sword is like a charging rhinoceros, unstoppable, even if its horn were to break. Jyn lunges to attack Visho, but Visho arches backward to evade the blow. Jyn realizes Visho might be restraining his full power, yet acknowledges he's managing to hold his own despite being only a 5-star swordsman. Just as Jyn starts to reach his physical limits, a fresh wave of determination surges through him. Visho attempts another strike, but Jyn falls back, sensing a familiar feeling. Channeling his sword aura, Jyn remarks that it has been a worthy fight. Visho moves in for another assault, but Jyn thrusts his own sword forward, shattering Visho's blade in two. As Visho continues his motion with the broken sword, Jyn sidesteps and inflicts a shallow cut across Visho's neck. Bearden announces that the victory belongs to Sir Visho Uliano. Visho is left wondering what just happened in that final moment. As Jyn collapses, losing consciousness, someone shouts for young Master Jyn to be brought inside immediately, and 2 soldiers carry him away to the medical room. Visho reflects on their duel, recalling how in the instant his sword shattered, he felt a stinging sensation graze his throat. He marvels at how Jyn could have possibly gauged the heart sword so rapidly. Visho realizes that if Jyn had reacted just 1/10 of a second sooner, or if he himself had been 1/10 of a second later, the outcome would have been entirely different. Worlds apart. After some time, Jin's eyes flutter open in his room, only to find Morrison perched squarely on his face. Seizing the creature, Jyn shoves him aside and demands he get off. As his gaze sweeps the room, he questions if he collapsed immediately after his duel with Visho. Just then, Jill steps into the room, informing him that he has been unconscious for 2 full days. It dawns on Jyn that the banquet has concluded. He laments his failure to properly greet the esteemed guests. Jill quickly reassures him, telling him not to be concerned, as for the past 2 days. The duel between him and Visho has been the sole topic of conversation, especially since Jyn unveiled the legendary heart sword in the final moments of their clash. In other corners of the estate, whispers about the duel are everywhere. They say Visho was just a breath away from being run through. One guest remarks, "It's simply astounding for a mere 5-star swordsman to attain the profound level of the heart sword." Another chimes in, "This certainly sets incredibly high expectations for Jin's future." Someone else concludes. Returning to the room, Jill continues to comfort Jyn, emphasizing that reaching the state of the heart sword, especially against a formidable 8-star knight, is a truly remarkable feat on its own. Jyn muses that his heart sword is still far from perfect, but it has certainly proven its devastating purpose. His mind drifts back to his sister, Luna's peculiar advice to never open his eyes while practicing, realizing how her unorthodox methods have helped this reincarnated soul in the most unexpected ways. Although the heart sword only seems to activate under the most extreme pressure, yet Jyn still feels it's an incredible achievement to have stood his ground against an 8-star knight. It might not have been a graceful victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. He begins to review the banquet's outcomes, having confirmed Baradin's identity as a Zippel, forging an unexpected friendship with the heir to the Ice Palace, and exposing the hidden connection between Bouvard Gaston and Visho. Jyn concludes that while the mystery of the transformation sorcerer remains, it's a plot point this reborn Manhwa hides for a later reveal, and not something he needs to solve this very instant. He resolves to gather more intelligence before jumping to any conclusions. As he thinks, Jill places a pot of flowers on the table directly in front of Jyn Runandell. He inquires about the bouquet, and she explains that Cirrus from the Ice Palace had them delivered for him. Mayan can't help but joke, wondering aloud if Cirrus has developed a fondness for the young master. Jill quickly clarifies that in the tradition of the Ice Palace, those specific flowers symbolize an eternal battle, not a romantic gesture. Jyn Runandell remarks with a wry smile that it seems Cirrus is eager for a rematch. Mayan points out that it's still quite significant to receive flowers from a young lady, even if they're a formal request for another duel, before asking Jill for her opinion. She sidesteps the question, instead stating that the patriarch has summoned Jyn to meet with him the moment he regained consciousness. Jyn asks if his father truly gave such an order. Jill simply nods, suggesting that the time has come for Jyn to finally prove his value. Jyn agrees, realizing that this likely means he'll need to depart from the family estate for some time. A short while later, Jyn Runandell stands within a dimly lit chamber, asking where his father might be. He spots a figure in the shadows and hears his father's voice declare that he's right there. His father then notes that it's been quite a while since one of his children has visited him dressed in such casual attire, correctly guessing that Jyn is preparing to live elsewhere for a time. Jyn confirms his suspicion, stating that he plans to depart very soon. He reflects that his father appears to approve of this decision, and he finds it peculiar that since his regression, his father has become significantly easier to comprehend. His father then asks Jyn if he recognizes their location. Jyn replies that they are standing within the mausoleum, the hallowed ground where those who have performed great deeds for the family are granted entry by the Garden of Swords, and where the family's legendary heroes who are laid to rest. His father solemnly agrees, explaining that this hallowed ground is consecrated for the clan's greatest heroes, who have safeguarded our lineage for thousands of years. He then poses a question to Jyn, asking if he knows the story of the first patriarch, Toron, and points out his conspicuous absence from this mausoleum. Jyn Runandell confirms, stating he is aware that no tomb for Tor Runandell, the first patriarch, exists within the Garden of Swords or any other known location. His father then begins to explain that the shadowy power Tor commanded is precisely why the first patriarch cannot be honored, and that following Tor's death, the Runandell family was forced into a shameful pact with the Zipfels, a deal that stripped them of their magical abilities. This also meant they could no longer properly venerate their magic-wielding ancestors. The Zipfels seized that opportunity to rally their gods and inflict a terrible curse upon the Runandell bloodline, ensuring all who were born after Tor would be completely unable to use magic. His father then brings up the time Jyn defeated the Htona brothers with his aura, admitting he never questioned how he acquired that immense power, asking if Jyn recalled the incident. Jyn confirms that he does, and even confesses that he lied, claiming he'd use his strength for the good of the family. His father remarks that it was a good thing Jyn was so young back then, because if the same thing were to happen now, he would not have let it slide so easily. He then asks Jyn if he has ever heard the voice of Solderet before. Jyn Runandell nods, acknowledging that Solderet calls him a contractor. As someone reincarnated he already knew this truth. Although he hasn't heard Solderet's voice in this current life, the advantage he possesses feels profoundly unfair to his siblings, a secret power that a reborn Manhwa hides. He then questions if using this power to dominate his siblings and take over the family would even be considered acceptable. Jyn then announces his intention to leave and travel the world, stating that if he finds nothing more precious than the Runandell legacy, he will return to claim it as his own. His father observes that while others left the Garden of Swords to seek the family's approval, Jyn is leaving to find a reason why the family is worthy of his own approval. He wonders aloud whether this is something to be proud of or merely a sign of incredible arrogance. He then tells Jyn that he will give him 5 years. In that time, he must either earn acknowledgement or bestow it upon the family, and then return with his final answer. Jyn Runandell draws his sword and touches the blade to his forehead in a formal gesture of respect. He thanks his father for everything, and promises to stand before him once again in 5 years' time. A short while later, Jyn Runandell steps outside, where Gilly and Murakhan are waiting for him. Gilly asks if his discussion with the patriarch was concluded successfully. He confirms that it was, and that now, all that remains is for them to depart. He notices she's holding luggage, but Gilly clarifies that the bag is hers, mentioning that it is designed to completely block her aura, preventing her from using her powers. He nods, saying he has heard about such things from the senior nannies. She confesses that it feels a bit strange to suddenly be unable to use her powers, especially since her position as a nanny means her entire reputation hinges on the success of her master. She tells him not to look so worried, reassuring him that this is all for his benefit. As the young master, Jyn promises her that not only for these next 5 years but for all the years to come, he will be the one to protect her, and he apologizes for the inconvenience this must be causing. Gilly tells him not to apologize, stating that it is enough for her to serve as his shadow guardian, and she will regain her full powers once he completes his journey. Ordeal. He acknowledges this and tells her to endure it, then pivots to gaze back at the castle gate. He contemplates the 5-year period stretching before him, recognizing this as the true beginning of his journey as a reincarnated soul. With unwavering determination, he sets forth. He intends to explore this world and discover everything it has to offer. Meanwhile, the patriarch is lost in his own contemplations. Despite having achieved the level of a demigod with his swordsmanship, he remained powerless to shatter the ancient oath sworn by his ancestors to the Zippel clan. However, witnessing Jyn's pact with Solderet and his command of shadow energy, the patriarch now sees that the family's youngest scion might just be their only salvation. This child could possess the very strength needed to finally liberate the Runandell family from its curse, and he is eager to witness what destiny has in store for him. At the same time, Jyn Runandell stands deep within a forest, conjuring a magical light that dances in his palm. Gilly asks if he is certain this is wise, departing without a single farewell, mentioning that the cadets in his faction and the young lady Luna would surely be disheartened by his sudden absence. He reassures her not to worry, explaining that Luna possesses a remarkably free spirit, and while it's a shame to leave the cadets behind, it is hardly as if he is marching to his doom. He clarifies that if he had announced his departure, they would have likely offered a grand salute, their blades raised high in his honor as he left. She concedes that this is a strong possibility, adding that they might have staged an even more elaborate display of their loyalty. She then inquires about his intended destination, noting that she's heard the majority of other flag-bearers chose Mammoth as their first stop, as taking down notorious villains is the most direct path to gaining renown. He mulls over the nature of fame, reflecting that Runandell's provisional flag-bearers must forge their own reputations from scratch in the outside world to be recognized as official flag-bearers. Furthermore, they are completely cut off from any family support throughout this entire endeavor. He considers his sister Mary as a prime example. She vanquished countless formidable opponents across the southern regions of the continent, earning the title Madwoman of the South or Winfrey Mary long before she became a flag-bearer. Thinking on his siblings, he recalls that, with her exception, all of his other siblings returned within a period of 6 months to 2 years. And yet, their father has granted him a total of 5 years, and there can be only one reason for such a lengthy time frame. His ultimate goal is to uncover everything there is to know about shadow energy before he makes his return. He then declares that their destination will be the Aran Kingdom. She seeks clarification, asking if he means the nation aligned with the Lyro Magic Federation, questioning why he would venture there when it is not Zippel territory. Jyn Runandell explains that during his mission to the Colin Ruins, he learned of a significant number of unregistered mages causing chaos in that region. It appears they have forged alliances with martial artists and are causing considerable hardship for the people of Iron. She agrees that this is a sound plan, remarking that she rather enjoyed dealing with such scoundrels back when she served as a soldier on active duty. A thrill of anticipation courses through him as he reflects that he never should have known this information. It was a secret he gained in his past life, before he was reincarnated. All the unregistered magicians and warriors there are merely puppets for a shadowy family called Tessing. He recalls the true prize, the kind of secret a reborn Manhwa hides from everyone, are the underground auctions that this clandestine group operates. He fully expects to find a wealth of items there whose true, immense value remains completely unknown. She mentions the upcoming auctions where there are a few grimoires and a particular ring he needs to acquire, but she expresses her doubts. She doesn't believe they can even use the teleportation gate to reach the Aran Kingdom, reminding him that according to the family's strict rules, she was only permitted to carry 10 gold coins. Furthermore, as a mere reserve flag-bearer, he is forbidden from revealing his identity as a Runandell. Consequently, she sees no way for them to secure any additional support. He, however, calmly states that the issue will be completely resolved once they arrive in the Jyn Kingdom. She questions how they could possibly get there, to which he simply responds that they will simply fly. He then turns to Murakhan, demanding to know what he's waiting for and ordering him to transform. A skeptical Murakhan questions if that's truly a wise decision. Gilly immediately objects, worried that someone might recognize him, but Jyn Runandell confidently assures her that it's perfectly fine. He insists they should at least attempt it, despite the considerable risk of the family discovering their actions. Murakhan then leaps down from Gilly's shoulder and shifts into his true dragon form, warning them to brace themselves as he must fly at incredible speed to reach the Jyn Kingdom by the next day. Elsewhere, Luna Runandell is strolling down a corridor when she glimpses Murakhan soaring past the window. In utter shock, she murmurs, "It can't be Jyn. He's riding a dragon the moment he becomes a reserve flag-bearer." It's as if he's been reincarnated with unimaginable boldness. Placing a hand on the cool glass, she remarks on how extraordinary he is, having left without even a word of farewell to his own sister. She silently wishes him good fortune in the battles ahead, her stoic younger brother. Some time later, their party finally arrives in the Jyn Kingdom. Gilly is clearly feeling dizzy from the flight, and Murakhan asks with concern if she is all right. She admits her stomach is churning, which causes Murakhan to glare angrily at Jyn and complain that this is all his fault for terrifying strawberry pie, their affectionate nickname for Gilly. Jyn Runandell immediately retorts that it is not his fault in the slightest. He blames Murakhan's erratic flying. Jyn clarifies that his only instruction was to fly, then turns to reassure Gilly, gently telling her to take slow, deep breaths. He supports her with his arm, instructing her to lean against him, soothing her with a calm voice. Jyn Runandell then pivots back to Murakhan, asking if his foul mood is simply due to the public's perception of black dragons. Murakhan grumbles that he can't help it, then offers to watch over strawberry pie while Jyn goes to acquire the funds they require. Jyn sternly warns Murakhan to remain exactly where he is and not to cause any trouble. The perspective then shifts to the heart of the Jyn Kingdom's capital, where Spur Bill is seated on a small hill, gazing out at the opulent mansions below. He muses to himself that even though a grand banquet was supposedly hosted in his honor, he only learned of it after the event had concluded, despite it being a part of his commission. He reflects on how Jyn Runandell saved his very life and his deep desire to meet him again to properly express his gratitude. He remembers Jyn's parting words, "If you ever require my assistance, you need only let me know." Spurbill ponders when he might ever get the opportunity to encounter him again and repay this immense kindness. It seems the plot of a reborn manhwa hides a fated reunion, because just then, Jyn Runandell calls his name from behind. Spurbill turns in response, startled to see who it could possibly be. Jyn Runandell places a reassuring hand on Spurbill's shoulder, telling him to relax and saying, "It's me, Jyn, the one who rescued you from those thugs from Kylon." A stunned Spurbill asks how on earth Jyn found him here. Jyn simply reminds him of his earlier promise to provide help if needed. "You do remember, don't you?" Spurbill hastily confirms, "Of course," adding that he could never possibly forget the incredible kindness Jyn had shown him. He owes his very life to him. Jyn, looking satisfied, says, "Excellent. In that case, just wait here a moment while I procure some golden funds." Spurbill is left utterly shocked by the audacious request. He was stunned by the sudden demand for cash, considering it an absolute rule, a core secret this reborn manhwa hides, that all reserve flag bearers must operate in complete anonymity. This was because they were required to forge their own legends based on personal skill, not coast on the coattails of their family's formidable name. It was widely expected that the young scions of Runandell, still novices in the art of combat, would lead exceptionally harsh lives. For the first several months, their existence was meant to be one of utter modesty. He reflected that until they could amass their own fortune, by collecting bounties or taking on mercenary work, they were forced into a life of frugality. Yet, his path was proving to be quite different. They were actually eating well. A short time later, as Jill, Jyn, and Morin strolled down the road, they began discussing their journey so far. Jill remarked that the cuisine in the G Kingdom was surprisingly decent, admitting she had been fully prepared to go hungry for a few days, just as so many other flag bearers are forced to do. "But thanks to you, Jyn, our start has been much smoother," she added, prompting Morin to laugh and chime in. "Just yesterday you were calling it extortion," he teased, "but I bet you're glad you did it now." Jyn Runandell simply replied, "It wasn't extortion. By providing that money, Spurbill was merely settling his debt." Jyn recalled the image of Spurbill handing over a hefty sack of coins. The man had even expressed his profound gratitude, thanking Jyn for his assistance. Changing the subject, Jyn turned to Morin. "Are you eating a bit too much?" He pointed out that they were just about to use a teleportation gate, warning, "If you overdo it, you might just lose your lunch, like you did the last time." Morin shot back, "Oh, shut it. I'm a binge eater. I have to load up first, even if it all comes back up later." He then jabbed a thumb at himself. "Besides, what's this binge eater talk? Don't forget who's funding this trip." Morin then retorted, "And if you don't want to see me get sick, you have another option. You can just ride on my back instead. You're the one who's so keen on using the teleportation gate anyway." Jill nodded in agreement. "If it's only a bit of motion sickness, we can certainly handle it," she offered. But Jyn Runandell shook his head, explaining that her discomfort isn't the real issue. "The problem is our destination, the Aran Kingdom. It's a key territory within the Ludo Magic Federation. And that federation," he continued grimly, "is controlled by the Zippel family. A staggering 80% of all active dragons are under their command. Flying Morin into their airspace without a care in the world would be tantamount to a declaration of war." However, he added, a slight smile touching his lips, with knowledge that seemed almost prophetic, as if he were reincarnated. He knew that more than half of those dragons would flee in terror just hearing Morin's name. Morin just muttered in annoyance. "Humph, to think those whelps are strutting around with such arrogance now. It just shows how far the world has fallen," he grumbled. He then reminded Jyn, "And I've already warned you about me transforming in the middle of a public street." Jin's mind, however, was already calculating the odds. He considered the dragons, the gods indebted to them, and the vast network of contractors bound to those very gods, all of whom currently bolstered the Zippel family's power. In stark contrast, he realized he was the only member of the Runandell clan to currently hold a contract with a god. If it weren't for his father's overwhelming presence, the Zippels would have likely annihilated the Runandell family long ago. This led him to wonder just how the Zippel clan had managed to amass such a legion of contractors in a single generation. It felt like far more than a simple coincidence. Sometime later, Jyn Runandell stood before a stern-faced guard who was demanding to see their identification papers. "So, we're here," he thought, calmly handing over 2 identification cards and introducing himself as Jyn Grey. He presented his companion as Jill Pitton, explaining that they were merely visiting the Aran Kingdom as tourists. A short time later, Jyn Runandell found himself seated among other travelers in the waiting area as a mechanical voice echoed through the system. It informed all passengers that their teleportation to the Akan Kingdom was imminent, cautioning that they might experience mild headaches and a sense of vertigo during the transit, and thus should remain comfortably seated. Gilly then remarked, "Just as expected from an identification card forged by the family, we passed through without a single complication." Jyn Runandell replied, "That's hardly a surprise. A Runandell ID is sophisticated enough to deceive even the Vermont Special Affairs Division." The system's voice returned, thanking everyone for their patience and declaring that the teleportation sequence would commence shortly. Gilly, instinctively held Murakan closer in his feline form, while Jin's thoughts drifted to the Akin Kingdom, a place he knew from his past life as if he was reincarnated. Even though 15 years had passed in this life, they were now being transported to that very same place, the Ludero Magic Federation's Akin Kingdom. Upon their arrival, the system's voice chimed once more, "You have reached your destination. Welcome to the Ludero Magic Federation's Akin Kingdom." Moments later, they stepped out onto the streets, where Jyn Runandell reflected that in the final year of his previous life, right before his regression, the capital of Akin had looked almost identical to this. Despite the 15-year gap in time, the scenery had barely changed. The streets were lined with vendors hawking their wares, yet right beside them were the destitute with hollow, dark expressions. Gilly surveyed their surroundings and commented, "It's a strangely somber place, considering the pleasant weather." Jyn surmised it was likely a result of the Zippel's oppressive regime, recalling that he'd heard conditions were especially harsh during this period. "Let's find accommodations first," he suggested, "and then we can search for our targets." Gilly readily agreed with a nod. A short while later, they stood before a dilapidated inn, and Murakan demanded, "Do we truly have to stay in a hovel like this?" Gilly calmly replied, "The young master surely has his reasons. But I am a being of immense wealth," he argued. "There is absolutely no need for us to lodge here." Jyn Runandell simply moved toward the door and posed a question. "And would it be wise for a group of unregistered mages to arrive in a neighborhood like this, openly flaunting that they are flush with coin?" Murakan shot back. "So, because of that, we must stay in a place that even orcs would find beneath." Jyn simply told him to be quiet as they entered the establishment, finding a man named Jet asleep at a table. Jyn called out to him, "Are you the proprietor of this inn?" Jet stirred awake and greeted them, his eyes sizing them up. A pretty boy, a novice swordsman, and a beautiful woman who looked to be a maid. He offered them a drink, saying, "Welcome to Jet's Inn. We have plenty of rooms available, and this here is our specialty orange juice. Please, have a glass while you choose whichever room you desire." Gilly accepted a glass as Jet thought to himself that once they drank it, they would awaken in the depths of the underground auction house, ready to begin a brand new life of servitude. Murakan eyed the juice and sneered, "Is this insignificant fool completely mad?" before flinging the contents of the glass directly into Jet's face. Stunned, Jet sputtered, "What do you think you're doing?" Murakan stepped forward and drove a fist into his gut, demanding, "How dare you attempt to drug us with this filth?" Jet denied everything, crying out, "What do you— Poison?" Murakan declared grimly, "For this treachery you will meet your end here today." Jet began to plead, "Wait please, let's just talk this over." But Murakan silenced him with a swift kick to the face. At that moment, Jyn Runandell recalled exactly who Jet was. The truth, this reborn Manhwa hides is often found in the faces of such lowlifes. This self-proclaimed informant, a purveyor of high-quality intelligence, was someone Jyn had actually relied upon in his past life. In fact, Jet's assistance was the sole reason he, an exile with no resources to his name, managed to establish a foothold in Erin back then. But their association was far from simple. Jet had swindled him on countless occasions under the pretense of guiding him to the underground testing auction houses, stripping the naive Jyn of everything but the very clothes on his back. Jyn internally seethed. The memory alone was infuriating. However, in this life, he intended to turn the tables and use Jet for his own advantage. Jet, meanwhile, protested that he wouldn't just take this abuse, reminding them that he was a person of some renown. A star, in his own words. Mochin delivered another blow, bluntly asking who gave a damn. Jet immediately recanted, admitting his mistake. He pleaded that it wasn't poison, merely a sedative, to which Muin retorted that it was effectively the same thing. Jyn Runandell decided this had gone on long enough. He instructed Moran to halt, proposing they hear what the informant had to say. McKenna was the first to object, questioning why they should even listen to a man who just attempted to drug them all. Jet pleaded for his life, vowing to make up for his transgression. Moran silenced him with a threat, ordering him not to utter another word until his last breath. It was then that Jyn Runandell addressed Jet directly. He explained that he would ask a few questions, a lie would mean death, while the truth would grant him his life. Jyn added a chilling condition. The verdict would be based solely on his own subjective feelings and instincts. A terrified Jet could only agree. Mirren sighed in resignation, stating, "Fine, do as you please." Jyn began the interrogation, asking for Jet's profession. The man confessed his name was Jet. He was an innkeeper and an informant, but also a con artist and someone involved in the trafficking of people. He insisted that if they spared him, his extensive knowledge of Erin would be invaluable, swearing he wasn't lying this time. Jyn then posited that Jet's motive for drugging them was to take them somewhere specific. Jet shamefully confirmed this, and Jyn demanded to know the destination. The informant revealed his plan was to deliver them to an underground auction house run by the testing organization. Jyn pressed him for more details. Jet explained that testing is a shadowy syndicate that runs auctions dealing in indentured individuals, illicit substances, stolen merchandise, and even rare artifacts, essentially, anything with a price. Jyn thought to himself that he had finally found his way back to the testing auction house. He agreed to get Jet medical attention, knowing exactly what his next move would be by nightfall. A grateful Jet thanked him profusely, but Moran scoffed at wasting money on medical care for such trash. Gilly concurred, warning that if they let him live, Jet would likely just betray them again. But Jyn countered her argument. He reasoned that the opportunity to dismantle a dark organization with an underground auction was well worth the risk. Besides, he assured them they could always dispose of Jet later if he proved to be treacherous. Miran reluctantly conceded the point. Jyn finalized his decision to trust Jet, noting they needed a local guide anyway, and declared their first task was to find a healer for his injuries. Stepping outside, Jyn sighed internally. This charade was exhausting, particularly since he already knew everything that was about to happen. It's the burden of the reincarnated. He couldn't reveal his regression to anyone, forcing him to maintain this act of discovery. Some time later, a gray-haired healer advised Jet to rest until his bones mended, offering his services again if needed. Jyn observed the man, recognizing him as a member of the Lero Magic Federation. The intricate plot this reborn Manhwa hides is something he must navigate carefully. The man they had just picked up off the street turned out to be an impossibly skilled healer. Jet stared at his own reflection in the mirror, fixating on the new gap where a tooth used to be. He cursed under his breath, thinking, "These people are absolutely unhinged. They beat me senseless and then patch me up." He was left completely baffled, wondering who on earth they could be. Heirs to a great martial arts family? Agents from B's Special Affairs Division? Whatever their origin, he knew one thing with chilling certainty. If he dared to betray them, there would be nothing left of him. Jyn Runandell then spoke up. "All right, it's time to move," he announced, signaling that their next destination was the underground auction houses. A short time later, Jet led the entire group to the clandestine auction house. At the gate, a guard eyed them suspiciously, asking Jet why he brought so many people along. "Are they new products for today's auction?" the guard inquired. Jet retorted sharply, "Watch your mouth and open the door. They are my guests." The guard reluctantly opened the heavy doors, and they all proceeded inside, where Jyn Runandell took in the sight of a massive crowd. Mayan commented on the amusing absurdity of an orchestra playing in a venue run by gangsters, observing how strangely serene the atmosphere was. Jet passed out face masks to everyone, explaining, "Even though the public believes Sala is the top dog in Tessing, the actual boss is someone else entirely." He advised them to wear the masks if they plan to join the auction, as it's always better to conceal your face. Jyn Runandell immediately asked, "Who is the real boss?" Jet disclosed the name in a low voice, Spy Hanalu. "And this entire place," he added, "is decorated to suit his specific tastes. Alu uses it to hide the fact that he's just an uneducated gangster." Jyn Runandell prompted him to continue, Jet admitted, "But Alu is a far cry from the usual small-time thugs you see around here. He not only possesses the power to control these unruly streets, but he's also a 7-star martial artist from the arable lands. And what's more, there's a rumor circulating that he has connections with the pure-blooded Runandell family from across the sea." Miran scoffed at the idea, dismissing the notion of the esteemed Runandell family associating with common neighborhood gangsters. "Does Jyn seriously believe that?" she questioned. Jill agreed, saying it didn't seem plausible. However, Jyn Runandell's expression told a different story. He was recalling a certain individual who had the unique influence to bridge the gap between the Magic Federation and the criminal underworld. This was the very person who had cursed him, a cruel fate for someone who felt he'd been reincarnated to master the sword. If there was any connection to the Lero Magic Federation, it was highly probable that this was his man. He reflected on the 9-star curse known as Blades Delusion, the very affliction that had stolen his ability to wield a sword. It was the kind of deep, tragic secret a reborn Manhwa hides, and he doubted any mage in Tessing could cast such a powerful curse. But after spending a full decade at Storm Castle and another 5 years at the Garden of Swords with 0 leads, he was running out of options. He felt an undeniable urge to investigate. 15 years without any answers meant that even the slightest possibility was worth pursuing. Jyn Runandell concluded that since their primary goal was to stir things up anyway, investigating Alu's identity was a worthwhile endeavor. Miran then asked about the plan, suggesting that if his strategy involved, for instance, eliminating all the gangsters in the area on their very first day in Erin, it might not be the wisest approach. Jill chimed in, mentioning that the guards they saw on the way in seemed highly skilled, and she had noticed quite a few individuals who looked like unregistered magicians. She pointed out that suddenly, starting a fight in the middle of enemy territory was probably not a good idea. Jyn Runandell simply told them not to worry, assuring them that he had a plan. Gilly inquired what that plan was, and Jyn simply responded by asking both of them to lend him their ears. Mayan gently tapped his own temple, remarking that he sometimes truly wondered what went on inside Jin's head, as if he were reincarnated with plans beyond their comprehension, and how he even conceived of such audacious ideas. Jill concurred, admitting it was a massive shock and questioning if this was truly a course of action befitting a Runandell. Jyn simply reassured them, stating that if the situation soured, they could always flee. Jet then interjected, announcing their arrival and mentioning he had intentionally secured them a discreet location. He proceeded to pull back the curtain, declaring, "Welcome to the Tessin Underground Auction." On stage, the auctioneer proclaimed that the next lot was about to be presented, stressing that the origin and history of these items were irrelevant. The first merchandise to be displayed was something to be used in any manner for any purpose the buyer desired. They were selling human beings. A nearby spectator commented that the stock appeared to be in good condition today, specifically pointing out a man at the rear who looked capable of performing a wide variety of labor. Jyn Runandell then grimly remarked that this dark reality is a truth a reborn Manhwa hides, and that they themselves could have easily ended up on that auction block. Jed confesses that his actions were indeed reckless, and as Jyn scans the faces of the slaves, a small measure of relief washes over him to find no children in the group. Mayan then breaks the silence. She asks for their next move, and Jyn advises patience, explaining that occasionally, truly valuable items surface at these clandestine auctions. He states that if an item of significant worth appears, he's fully prepared to purchase it, and once their objective is secured, they will proceed with their plan. Jyn is confident that if his intel holds true, the very artifact he's after is likely gathering dust in a storage room somewhere. He knows he can simply claim it once they set their carefully laid scheme into motion. Meanwhile, the auctioneer's voice booms, declaring the event is officially underway. Jyn reiterates the need for patience, urging them to wait for the perfect opportunity. The scene then fast-forwards an entire week, with the auctioneer's voice still echoing through the hall. He calls out bids, starting at 20, jumping to 130, and then provocatively asking for 1,000. A nervous Jed approaches Jyn Runandell, pointing out that he has been merely observing for a week straight. "You've done nothing but watch for 7 whole days," Jet whispers. "If you don't make a purchase today, the Tessans are bound to become suspicious of us." Jyn coolly retorts, asking if managing such delicate situations isn't precisely Jet's responsibility. Jet forces a smile, saying, "But of course, young master, please, do as you wish." Internally, however, he's screaming, convinced that if Jyn doesn't buy something anything soon, they'll be unceremoniously thrown out, no matter who he is. He mentally pleads with Jyn to just acquire one item before their cover is completely blown. On stage, the auctioneer moves to introduce the next lot. "Our next item," he announces, "is the first magic tome of the evening, the legendary grimoire of Matthew Walk." He continues, "Walk was a sorcerer of immense power, who once held dominion over the entire world, and while we cannot decipher its contents, I assure you, it most certainly contains magic of the highest order." A voice from the crowd immediately calls out a bid of 80. The auctioneer points, acknowledging the offer, and scans the room, asking for a higher bid. Jyn Runandell smirks to himself. As someone who was reincarnated, he knew the auctioneer had the name completely wrong. It wasn't Matthew Walk, but Matthew Mack, a notorious swindler. He recalled that every single one of Mack's fraudulent tomes was under the strict control of the Ziffel clan, meaning this one was undoubtedly a fake. It had been a full week of attending the Tessan auction, and the pattern was depressingly familiar. The presenter would spin a web of lies. And time after time, the more gullible mages in the audience would eagerly fall for the charade. As the auctioneer moved to the next item, Jyn Runandell observed the room. He mused how easily these amateur sorcerers were duped. The auctioneer then presented another tome, announcing, "The author of this next piece is the enigmatic TZ. Zenim, we shall start the bidding at a mere 50 gold coins." Jin's interest was piqued. He knew that sometimes, tomes like this one appeared. They might not be from famous authors, but they were essentially unscratched lottery tickets, holding untold potential. A flurry of bids immediately erupted from the crowd. Moroccan placed a heavy hand on Jin's shoulder, leaning in to suggest he purchase that specific tome, remarking that if it was truly penned by a Zini, it was a major find. He knew this was a significant opportunity. Without hesitation, Jyn Runandell raised his bidding card high. The auctioneer's eyes widened in surprise and he asked if there were any higher bids. A murmur went through the crowd, with one person wondering aloud if Jyn was serious about paying such a price, while another speculated that he must be the spoiled heir of some wealthy dynasty. Jyn Runandell, however, was focused on the tome, thinking how the truth this reborn Manhwa hides is often seen only by those with unique insight. He knew better than to ever question the instincts of a dragon like Moroccan. The auctioneer's gavel fell. "Sold for 150 to the young gentleman." Moroccan then glanced at the very next magic tome presented, muttering with confusion as to why such an item would even be here. The auctioneer introduced it as the Grimoire of Suhi. "Who in the world is that?" Moroccan asked, completely baffled by these obscure names. First it was that Zini fellow, and now this. But before he could finish, Jyn Runandell raised his card again. He placed a bid of 200. The auctioneer, thrilled, announced the new price and called for any further bids. Someone in the crowd murmured to his neighbor, "Who is this kid, and why is he only bidding on the strangest items?" Even Moroccan turned to Jyn Runandell, asking him the very same question. Kicked off the bidding at 200. Jyn explains that he felt compelled to purchase one last item, hoping to stumble upon something truly captivating, especially given its connection to his former master from the Heiser clan. He distinctly recalls hearing that the Heiser clan had fallen into ruins centuries ago, so he was astonished to discover a remnant of their legacy at this very auction. With that, the auctioneer's hammer falls, declaring the item sold for 200. Jyn muses that it would make a fine gift should he ever meet his master again, and remarks, "All right, that's settled, let's move out." Meanwhile, Moroccan spots a collection of books and exclaims, "Jackpot! This is exactly the kind of secret a reborn Manhwa hides." He then questions, "But what is this? There's a bizarre, complicated encryption on it." Jyn calmly replies that, naturally, only he and his master possess the key to decipher it. Jet, sighing in relief that Jyn finally bought something, notes that it would have looked suspicious if he'd left empty-handed today. Jyn then summons Jet, and upon his response, Jyn declares their next target, a meeting with Spider Handu. Jet questions the command, stating that it's impossible even for a paying customer. Jyn Runandell then issues a command, relay a message to Alu, informing him that Barrett and Zippel demand an audience with him in person. The man moves with haste, thinking to himself that his visitor isn't from the Vermont Special Forces, but a pure-blooded Zippel. As he opens the door, he schemes that if he can curry favor with the Zippel clan, he'll finally escape this backwater and achieve greatness. He then orders the messenger to tell Alu to present himself, as Barrett and Zippel are waiting. However, his path is immediately blocked by several guards, with one towering figure stepping forward to demand if he is truly Barrett and Zippel. The guard instructs him to follow, as the boss wishes to see him. However, Jyn reacts instantly, landing a swift punch squarely on the guard's face. He demands to know if this is some kind of joke. Jyn then unleashes his fire magic, questioning if the man he just struck down is Alu. The disoriented guard quickly clarifies that he is not Alu, but that Mr. L, the boss, had ordered him to escort Jyn and two others to a meeting. In that exact moment, a sudden, massive explosion rocks the area. Jyn, enraged by the deception, realizes he has given his name only for Alu to send minions instead of appearing personally. He bellows, "Let me be perfectly clear. Tell him to come out and face me himself, and he'd better crawl on all fours to get here." After a tense moment, Alu's voice finally responds from the shadows. He confesses to being Alu, Tessing's caretaker, utterly failing to recognize the true power residing in the heavens above him as he begs for forgiveness. Jyn muses internally that if any other person had dared to claim the title of Baron Zippel, he would have dismissed it as a laughable joke. But this boy was different. His very presence radiated a unique energy, and that fireball he'd conjured was fueled by at least 5-star mana. Alu realized with dawning horror that any youth capable of wielding such high-level magic at his age could only be a true prodigy from the Zippel clan. The scene then flashes back to 1 week prior, where Jyn Runandell first declared his intention. He was going to impersonate Baron Zippel. Merkin, utterly baffled, could only ask what on earth he meant, while Jilly noted that even if Alu did recognize someone associated with the Zippel family, it would probably be an old, long-serving attendant. Jyn explained that this very ambiguity meant there was no definitive way to disprove his claim. Jilly, however, was already pondering the severe implications, realizing it wasn't simply a question of whether Jyn would be exposed. If the Runcandle clan, or worse, the patriarch himself, ever caught wind of this deception, the consequences would be catastrophic. Returning to the present moment, Jyn Runandell looks down upon the groveling man. He coldly instructs Alu to rise, and the man scrambles to his feet. Replying with a nervous yes, Alu presents 2 tomes to Jyn, asking him to please examine them. Before Jyn can even ask, Alu hastily confesses that they are magic texts, immediately apologizing for having acquired them without the Zippel family's express authorization. He explains that these 2 particular volumes are highly coveted by his own family. Jyn then cuts in, demanding to know how much profit Alu has made from illicit activities like this one. Alu desperately offers an excuse, claiming that he is first and foremost a martial artist and simply failed to grasp the true value of these magic texts, which has now caused the young master such inconvenience. He vows to do everything in his power to retrieve them, pleading for just one more chance. Jyn cuts him off with a sharp gesture, telling him to be silent and bring him the account ledger and the complete customer list, stressing that his family will commence their official investigation tomorrow. Jyn knows this is the end for Tessing, a truth this reincarnated, reborn Manhwa hides behind his calm facade. Despite their efforts to build a reputation in the Aran Kingdom, they were nothing more than a petty gang when compared to the might of the Zippel family. Jyn recognized that if any part of the forthcoming investigation displeased the Zippels, it would spell the absolute end for Tessing. A short while later, they are seated in a private room, sifting through papers and books as Alu stands before them, claiming this is everything from the auction house. Jyn Runandell raises an eyebrow and asks if this is truly all of it. Alu admits there are more items, but they are kept under heavy guard and secured within the employee's private residence. He then requests permission to depart temporarily, promising he can return with the remaining items in less than 2 hours. Jyn Runandell's voice is laced with ice as he asks if Alu is planning to use that time to destroy important documents.